It's the week beginning Monday the 8th of October, and this is Business Unwrapped, brought to you by Barclays Corporate Banking. All through this bonus series, we've been speaking with experts about an industry story that's shaping how we live our lives in the years to come. I'm Olly Mann. Let's unwrap the business week. And joining me today from the week's digital team is Rebecca Gillie, and alongside her, our special guest today, Katherine Purvis. Hi, Katherine.
Hi.
Now, you work as a journalist for The Guardian and others. Without spoiling what you're here to talk about, give us a sense of the kind of topics you write on and what you're looking into at the moment.
Yeah, so one of the things I focus on is social care, particularly the issues that affect people who work in that sector. So one of the things I'm looking at the moment is care worker pay.
So, a subject that's much discussed, but I suppose not very sexy very often when you're trying to pitch stories to editors?
No, it's not very sexy at all. But there is a lot to be said about it. There's an argument of whether pay should be increased or whether that would attract the wrong people to the job.
What is the story you've brought with you today?
So the story I brought with me today is whether or not men can fill the social care workforce gap.
I love my job. I think there's a lot of meaning to what I do in care work. I think there's a lot of enjoyment I get from it. I think I come to work and I don't really feel like I'm going to work. I don't dread it or anything like that. A lot of people think it's just a woman's thing, is being a carer. I think it's exclusive to being just a woman. But no, I think there's definitely opportunities in here for males, because as people are getting older now, there's a lot more males going into care, especially with things like dementia and Alzheimer's. I think there's a lot of opportunities in care as well. You can do training and you can take your career as high as you like it to be, really. And I'd say for me, it's been not just a stepping stone, but a milestone for me personally.
Care assistant Jared Stansfield talking about his career at Heathside Care Home in Surrey. So, Katherine, what's the story here?
So the story is that only 18% of the social care workforce is made up by men. And that's only like a 2% increase from 2015. But the social care sector does need more men to be care workers because there are more men reaching the stage of their lives where they need the kind of care and support that's provided in a care home. The life expectancy gap between men and women is closing. So there are more men reaching that age. And
what, people prefer to be cared for by people of their own gender?
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable assumption to make. There are certain aspects of care that are very intimate. So someone helping you to wash, someone helping you to get out of bed, to change your clothes, that's a really intimate thing. So it's understandable that someone would want someone of the same gender to be that person for them. But it goes beyond gender as well. I think people would want someone from the same ethnic background as them, perhaps who grew up in the same area. So it's not just a kind of binary split of male-female, it's also down to ethnicity as well.
But beggars can't be choosers, and there's been a decline in people choosing to work in the care sector generally.
That's true, but there is this growing emphasis on people who go into residential care homes or who are looked after at home being able to choose who cares for them and in what way they're cared for. So the care sector does need a diverse workforce to match the diversity of the people who need to be cared for.
Rebecca, why do you think this story, the slight but nonetheless notable increase in male care workers, has been relatively underreported?
I think it's a very undervalued sector generally. And I think one of the reasons is that it's predominantly made up of female workers, and for a long time I think it's been seen by a lot of people as kind of an extension of women's role as, wives and mothers caring in their personal lives. So it is undervalued. We often hear the same thing about early years teaching as well, how it's an undervalued sector because it's made up of women and it's seen as a woman's job. And I think that's why we don't hear as much about those sectors, especially in terms of employment rights, pay, working conditions, because it is often seen as a vocation that people should, be drawn to rather than be looking for a certain quality of life from it.
Katherine, I alluded to this as well when I introduced you about perhaps newspaper editors not being that keen on these stories in a way, because they're not sexy is the word I use, but you know what I mean. In a way, part of the reason perhaps that caring isn't debated amongst the public as a whole is because it's not something people really want to think about. Unless they have an elderly relative or a disabled child or something like that, people think, well, this when this affects me, I'll deal with it, but I don't want to spend my time thinking about how people with Alzheimer's are treated.
I think that's really true, and I think that's also one of the barriers to why people don't want to go into care work, because there is that unspoken reality of, for older people who go into care homes, it's the place where they go to live out their final years before they die. We don't like to talk about death, we don't like to think about death. So to be working in that environment, to be surrounded by the possibility of it every day, it must be really tough. And you can understand why someone wouldn't want to choose that for their career.
And you met some of these men who are working in care for your article for The Guardian. What did they tell you were the benefits of working in that sector?
The guys I spoke to all said they found an immense sense of satisfaction in being able to help people live out their lives. When people can't do certain tasks for themselves, they found it immensely empowering, and even just being able to cheer someone up if they're feeling down, or if they haven't been visited by a family member for some time, just spending time with them, talking to them. It's not just doing those daily tasks for someone, helping them get up and wash themselves. It goes beyond those kind of functions. It's more having a relationship with a person and having a friendship that they wouldn't otherwise have.
And actually, sort of putting it into tasks like that, from the male psyche point of view, I mean, if we're going to talk down gender stereotype lines and we're going to say perhaps people thought women were more drawn to caring, perhaps equally people might think men are more inclined to do things where they feel they're achieving small things along the way, that it's important to say, here's my to-do list of things and I'm going to do it, I'm going to fix it. That the male approach to things is less about a daily grind, more about these are the things that I can make better and I want to do them. Is there a way that jobs could be marketed to men that might bring more men into the profession?
If care worker jobs were marketed to show that there is progression, to show that you won't just be a care worker all your life, you can progress to kind of senior care worker, to a team leader, to management position, that would help attract more people into the role. But I think there is a sense that the people that you're looking after, you can't fix them. You can make their lives better and you can improve their day. You can have a laugh with them, play games, make them smile, do things for them that they wouldn't be able to do. But in the grand scheme of things, you can't fix them, and I think that's a problem.
Is it maybe a career as well, Rebecca, that appeals to people when they themselves are a little bit older? You know, people perhaps might start thinking about going into care when they have had children of their own. Perhaps before then, you know, if you're talking about teenagers and 20-somethings, it's a bit of a hard sell. Spend your day with old people.
Yes, but I have to say, like, one of the interesting statistics in Katherine's article is that while I think it was 85% of men say that they wouldn't seek out a career in care, only 76% of men aged 16 to 25 said that they wouldn't be interested in that kind of career. So I think actually younger men might be a little bit more drawn to it, which I would imagine probably comes down to, you know, kind of breaking down of social and gender barriers, the idea that women are naturally empathetic and that caring is a woman's job. I think younger generations are a bit less susceptible to those ideas, and maybe younger men are a bit more open about things like mental health and, you know, forming emotional connections with people, which obviously is part of the caring profession.
And do you feel, Katherine, like these discussions are being had within the care industry? How do we appeal to more people? Because migration, the end of low-skilled migration, as Theresa May announced in her conference speech, that would seem to be problematic for this sector.
Absolutely. The issue of care worker recruitment and retention is one of the key things that's being discussed in the industry at the moment. And the problems that Brexit is going to present to the workforce is abundantly clear. And I think care providers are actively trying to recruit more people and a more diverse workforce to adapt to the future.
So where do you see us being in 10 years' time? You know, if you look into care and you're looking for good news stories, you don't often find them. It's presented as a bit of a ticking time bomb. The population's getting older and people don't want to work in it. So what can you tell us about what we might be looking at 10 years down the pipe?
Unfortunately, I think we're looking at the sort of worst case scenario that was put forward by Independent Age, which is a charity for older people. In this kind of zero net migration scenario, there's going to be a workforce gap of 1.1 million people by 2037. So we've got like 20 years before we get to that point. So I think time is of the essence in reaching out to young people in schools when they're making decisions about what they want to do for their careers, and making sure that they know that a career in care is a viable and interesting option.
And Rebecca, I suppose if we are following this down the gender lines, if you're looking for a positive spin on this 10 years down the track, Perhaps it is that men are changing, what young men expect of their careers and or their what used to be called feminine side is changing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we've also seen, a slight but growing number of men training as nurses and teachers. So I think there are positive signs that maybe younger men are opening up to the possibilities of joining those kinds of traditionally female professions.
And I suppose also the mental health piece as well, Katherine. Men are being encouraged and are responding to being more open about their mental health. Perhaps they only want to do that to another man, but at least they're doing it to someone.
I mean, it can work both ways. So even though the care worker is there to look after a resident in a care home, that care worker may also find the opportunity to open up to that resident, and they can have a mutually beneficial relationship, and the resident could pass on some sage advice.
OK, Katherine, thank you for your sage advice, and thank you to Rebecca Gillie as well. That is it for your business briefing for this week. For more from our series on good news for British business, sponsored by Barclays Corporate Banking, go to theweek.co.uk/good news, or see this week's magazine. And subscribe to this podcast feed to hear our main show, The Week Unwrapped. You can find all the links at theweekunwrapped.com. I've been Olly Mann. Our music is by Tom Morby, the producer Matt Hill at Rethink Audio. Until next time, bye-bye.